zoning board meeting for the city of New Brunswick for May the 21st, 2018. We're all ready to go, Madam Chair.
Okay, roll call.
Evelyn Ascona. Charles McNair.
Here.
Doug Sheehan.
Here.
Peg Chester. John Zimmerman.
Here.
Ivan Adorno. Sue McElligott. John Cox.
Here.
Nancy Cole.
Here. Public announcement, Open Public Meeting Act.
Please be advised that the notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been complied with and satisfied. The annual notice will give sufficient notice of time, place, and conduct of all public meetings. The Board of Adjustment in the City of New Brunswick has provided the city clerk and placed on the appropriate bulletin board lobby of City Hall, 78 Byard Street, New Brunswick, New Jersey. Has been transmitted to the official newspapers of the City of New Brunswick, including the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger.
Salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes of the board's April 23rd, 2018 meeting.
Madam Chair, the members received copies of the minutes in their packets. Unless there's any changes, motion to approve would be in order. I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are good.
Communications and reports, resolutions of memorialization. JCM Investors 1012 LLC Z-2018-04, site plan and variance application for the construction of a mid-rise multifamily apartment building to be located at 111-113 Byard Street, Block 21, Lot 2.01, Zoning District C-4.
Madam Chair, members, copies of the resolutions. Unless there's any changes, a motion to approve is in order. The members eligible to vote are Mr. Cox and Ms. McNair. That's it. You know, motion from one of you.
I was going to say, so one has to make the other.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Charles McNair.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
There you go, that's easy. New business. Do you want to say something now?
Members of the public that are here, the applications for the 27 Stone Street will not be heard tonight. They do not want to go to tonight's hearing because there's not a full complement of the board. They have some use variances related to that, or D variances requiring 5 affirmative votes. The law allows them to have a full board review their application. So there are hearings being rescheduled for June the 25th, 2018, 7:30 p.m. In council chambers here at 78 Byard Street. There'll be no additional notice required for that. So if you're here for the frat application, that will not be heard tonight, and you can come back on the 25th. The other application, Sterling Side Urban Renewal, again, they are not going to be heard tonight for the same reason. They wanted a full board to hear their application. They will make a new notice for that, so if you're here for that, you will get personal notice if you're within 25 feet, and you'll be 200 feet. And a newspaper notice on that also. It'll be rescheduled for June the 25th, 2018. So if you're here for that application, it will not be heard tonight. We're just hearing the she did application for Lewis Street. All ready to go.
Thank you. So the first application, Joseph Shadid, Z-2018-05, variance application for the conversion of the ground floor of an existing 2-family dwelling into a retail commercial space located at 158 Lewis Street, Block 60, Lot 32, Zoning District C-1.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, board members, professional staff, Attorney James Clarkin of the firm of Clarkin and Mignola for the applicant. This is an application to convert an existing 3-bedroom apartment into retail space. The proposed retail space will be on the first floor. There is an existing 3-bedroom residential unit on the second floor, and that will remain. As the Bib Mill planning report points out, No new bulk variances are required as a result of this application. However, we are requesting that you allow us to continue several of the existing nonconformities that exist on the property, including lot area, lot width and lot depth, front and side setbacks, and also building and impervious coverages. As Mr. Carla's report points out, both the principal and the garage structures have been on this site since at least 1945, and I would say without any apparent negative impacts upon the neighborhood or the zone plan. A larger parking variance will be required. As a result of the proposed conversion, 2 additional parking stalls will be required under the ordinance for the retail space as opposed to what the department currently requires. Because we're making some minor revisions to the site, we've also requested amended preliminary and final site plan. The applicant does not have a tenant yet for the new space. One possibility is a convenience store. Now, interestingly enough, a convenience store is not listed as a permitted use in the C1 neighborhood commercial district in which this property is located. But oddly enough, both a delicatessen and a grocery store are permitted uses in this zone. So we're going to ask you for an interpretation that a convenience store is akin to a deli and a grocery store so that we have some certainty when we're going out looking for a tenant. Other points I'd like to make is that if you can buy the building, you'll know that it's in very well-maintained shape, and the retail use that we are contemplating would be a permitted use. Finally, the City Council has recently adopted 2 ordinances with regard to the 15-minute maximum parking both on Lewis Street and on Central Avenue, both at the request of my client. The one on Lewis Street, the hours are expanded now from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., and a new 15-minute parking space on Lewis Street right next to the driveway on the subject property has also been approved by the City Council. This will do 2 things for us. Number one, it will assist with providing parking for people who will come in and out of the retail store. And number 2, it provides easier access for delivery trucks so that they can make their deliveries because the space won't be clogged up with long-term people or residents parking there. We have 1 witness this evening who is our architect. After that, I'll give a proffer with regard to the planning and the variances, and we have the applicant present if we have any questions. And unless any of you have any questions, we'll proceed.
Thank you.
We'll call the architect.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
Thomas Giggles, Giverich.
And do you support the business matter?
I do. Yes, I'm the architect who measured the building and drew up, prepared the drawings.
All right, before we get into that, let's go through your credentials. Licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, for
And
30
how long?
years.
How long?
30 years?
30 years. And during that 30 years, have you testified before other planning and zoning boards in the
Yes.
state of New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay, how about your education?
Graduate NJIT in Newark in 88. Graduate. That's a long time ago.
Madam Chair, I would offer him up as an expert in the field of architecture.
We will accept you as an expert witness.
Okay. Did you prepare the site plan and the floor plans that accompany this application?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you describe what is currently on the property today?
It's a 2.5-story frame dwelling. As Jim mentioned, it's a 3-bedroom apartment, first and second floors. 1,120 square foot per floor. There's an accessory storage building in the rear. That's about 554 square feet. There's a long driveway where the people park their cars, the tenants. And there's a rear paved area used mostly by the tenants for recreation, like a patio.
All right, and with respect to the length of the driveway, how many cars could that accommodate?
3.
Okay.
You can only get credit for 2.
Pardon me?
You can only get credit for 2.
I would agree with you, all right? But what reality is and what the standards are oftentimes 2 different things. I think what's important to note is there's only 1 residential tenant on the second floor. And even if they have multiple vehicles, it's like a lot of us with, driveways that are only, one and not two across. You have to have a little cooperation among the family members. All right, what's the applicant's proposal?
Change the first floor apartment into a commercial space.
Okay. Can you go through for the board the details of what the improvements are that the applicant is proposing?
There's no building being added to, basically interior alterations and improvements. Driveway will remain, and the accessory building will remain. We are adding lights and security cameras along the side where the driveway is, and at the rear. There's a new garbage and refuse storage area that's between the accessory building and the adjacent building.
And how is that being created?
Right now, there's a wall there, so we're opening that space up. So we have access from the rear parking, rear paved area.
All right, and what's the distance, once that wall comes down, what's going to be the distance between the two buildings?
It's 46 inches.
Okay, and have we done some research on the width and the sizes of the containers that we're going to use to handle the garbage and recycling?
Yes, they're approximately 30 by 39 inches.
Okay,
So you could fit 3 or
30
4.
inches is the width?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll be able to easily maneuver those containers through that opening.
Right.
All right. We're also proposing an awning.
Yes, so they dress up the front and have lights in it. And whoever the tenant is would probably have their logo, their name on that sign, on that awning.
At this point, let me just interject. We have noticed that the garbage and recycling area will be partially on the adjoining lot next door, which is also owned by the applicant. And in recognition of that, we're going to propose, if we're lucky enough to get your approval tonight, a cross easement that will allow the garbage and access to be on both lots. Most of it's on the subject property, maybe 18 inches of it is on the next door neighbor. And this way, if the properties are separately sold, okay, we'll still have the right to utilize that area. Returning to some of the site improvements, so we're doing something with the rear air conditioning unit.
Is that being moved to the rear yard, the roof of the accessory building? So that will allow access to that alleyway for the refuse. Also adding planter boxes along the side of the building near the front. And there's a planting strip in the rear just before that accessory building. So that will be planted.
Have we offered to remove the 9 by 18 parking space that was shown on your plans?
Correct.
And that's in response to Mr. Bignell's report.
Correct.
All right. And loading, we're going to handle that how?
There's a 15-minute time limit for the parking, and that'll serve the commercial space.
All right, what I'd like to do between myself and the witness is to go through the staff reports. First of all, we'll take a look at Mr. Bignell's April 18, 2018 report. The first thing that I would like to point out is that the photographs that are on page 2, all 5 of those photographs are excellent illustrations of what the subject property looks like, the next door Joe's Liquors, the property across the street. Customarily, we would go to the comments that are on the final page, which are the plan review comments, in this case paragraph 10. With regard to item A, we recognize, of course, that we need to obtain all of the necessary governmental approvals. With regard to how the first floor retail space is going to be used, unfortunately, we cannot tell you now. I will say this, that we anticipate that the type of people that the retail space would draw would be more pedestrian in nature and not vehicular. It's a neighborhood that at least the applicant believes there's a need for additional retail space and services that people would want, and a lot of them would walk there. With regard to garbage and recycling, if we had a tenant that might create more garbage and recycling than we anticipate. We still have a very large rear yard where we could put the residential cans and open up that whole back portion for the retail space. So we have thought that through a little bit. With regard to item C, that's the rear parking space that we're going to remove. Item D is the adequacy of the parking. Item E, where do the residential tenants park, and that is in the driveway as we have indicated. Tom, can you tell us how that rear building is used? Do you know what it's used for? The accessory building.
The
storage-
storage
yeah.
for the adjacent building
All right, thank you.
business.
Are any facade signs proposed? The answer to that is none at this time, and if there were, obviously we would have to comply with the city ordinances. How commercial loading will occur? We have these two 15-minute spaces, one on Lewis Street and one on Central Avenue, which I think puts this property at an advantage over many others in the city that really don't have any nearby loading spaces. We've talked about how refuse will be handled. I'd like to now move, if I can, and then we can handle all the questions later, the Delaware and Raritan report, which is dated April 23. And Mr. O'Barra will tell me if I've skipped over anything. I was going to start with item number 4. It's noted that there are now modest site improvements. As you all know, what's in bold is the revised report from what was first prepared. We've included pavement markings, but we're not going to need them. With regard to item 4.2, we've characterized the customers that we anticipate we will draw from. With regard to item 4.3, we have not received any comments from the fire marshal. When we had our technical review committee meeting, I don't recall receiving any comments at all, and Mr. Siegel is shaking his head in agreement. 4.4, we would comply with that request. With regard to item 5.1, we recognize that we have a parking variance. With regard to item 6.1, that's where it's been noted that these structures have existed since at least 1945. 6.2 recognizes now that we have our lighting and our security cameras. With regard to 6.3, we will comply with that request with regard to the appropriate easement. With regard to item 7.1, we believe that the lighting will be adequate in the driveway area. And those of you who know this area and have gone to that intersection, you will know that it's lit up, as my mother would say, like Lunar Park. It is brighter than you could ever imagine. It's as bright in the nighttime as it is in the daytime, or at least so it seems. But I leave that to you. It's your city. You know its characteristics much better than anybody else. With regard to item number 8, that's a deferral to the Big Nell report. Signage, as I said before, will comply with all signage requirements. With regard to 10.1, we would agree with this comment. We don't think there's anything that we need to add there. With regard to items 11.1 and 12.1, which is looking for us to tell you that the sanitary and the water are sufficient, we would be requesting deferral, and if we're fortunate enough to get your approval, we would have these as voluntary conditions of that approval. With regard to item 12.2, I'm happy to tell you that the entire building will now be sprinklered, and that's a note that's indicated on the plans. With regard to 13.1, we did submit a written recycling plan back in February. With regard to the first two items in 14, they're informational. With regard to 14.3, we would comply with that request. We would also comply with 15.1. And that covers it. That represents the applicant's direct case, Madam Chairwoman. We're available for all of your questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted for, you discussed an awning being illuminated. We don't allow the illuminated awning, so you'll handle that during the zoning permit process, but
Yes,
if you're going to do that, it's going to be gooseneck or downlighting.
Oh, okay.
and that certainly is the way we would go.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Okay, let me just give you a profit with regard to the variances. Usually when I stand up here, I'm asking you for more residential units. Today's just the opposite. So I just thought that was worthy of note. Neighborhood seems to have a shortage of retail stores, and Mr. Shadid, who's been here for 34 years and should know what the neighborhood needs, thinks that he can step up to create one and benefit the neighborhood. No new variances. There is non-conforming conditions, which we ask you to continue. We really have no ability to purchase any land to make any of these conditions either conforming or even less non-conforming. We can justify the non-conforming conditions both under that hardship that we can't purchase any additional land and also under the C2 analysis because we think that the commercial use will be beneficial to the residents. Having another retail establishment will enable the residents in this neighborhood to walk to this retail location, eliminates vehicles, it eliminates pollution and emissions, and it's a positive. The non-conforming conditions have existed at least for 63 years back, at least in 1945, and I leave it to you to determine, but from all outward appearances, there doesn't seem to be any negative impacts on the zone plan or on this neighborhood. The additional parking variance of 2 spots is nominal, and we expect most of the traffic to be pedestrian and not vehicular. We think that you can reach the conclusion that the benefits substantially outweigh any of the detriments because we don't see any detriments. As to the convenience store, we see no difference between a deli and a convenience store or a grocery store and a convenience store, and would ask you to include in the resolution an interpretation to that effect. And that's it. I think it's a positive application. We hope to look favorably upon it.
Yeah, actually, the interpretation is for the administrative officer, I believe.
Okay.
Me.
Of course.
And that's fine, yeah, it's not a problem to have a convenience store there. That's essentially what a grocery store would do.
And the same one for its general merchandise.
Exactly.
So
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of discussion we had at the PRC, so I just wanted to get it out there.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak to this application? Yes, Charlie, please.
Charlie, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Charles Cradaville, Kratovil.
Do you support the full truth in this matter?
Yes, I do. Good evening, members of the board, professionals, applicant. Want to say for the record, I've lived on this block of Lewis Street multiple times in my time in New Brunswick, and I'm glad to see the owner of the property making an even further investment in the city. If it turns out to be a convenience store, deli, grocery store, then I support it. But I do want to know what other options are on the table, since it's not clear who the tenant's going to be. What else could it be if approved?
It's in the C1 zone, which is the lowest intensity commercial zoning district. I don't recall all of the uses off the top of my head. You can see it in the zoning ordinance, but there's nothing particularly intense that's allowed in the area. I mean, there's the liquor store there, that's permitted. There's a restaurant across the street, that's permitted. Similar type things like that that are neighborhood oriented as opposed to something you might find out on a highway. And you're not going to get a Wendy's there or something like that.
Okay, so a restaurant would be a possibility.
Yeah, but not a fast food driving.
Okay, and the only other question I had was regarding the recent city council ordinances about parking on the block. I recall they were adopted by the council on April 4th, and I just wanted to ask for the record, if the applicant could state whether they made any type of request to the council for that, those changes to be made, or if this is just a coincidence.
No, I actually indicated in my remarks that it was at the bequest of my client.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here from the public? Please come forward.
Pete, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Pete Smirnoff, TV, ERDOB.
Do you swear to hold truth in this matter?
I do. So, I live around the corner from the applicant. Throw a rock from my backyard, but hit his building. I would never do that, of course. I would say that, Joe has been invested in New Brunswick longer than I've been alive. He cares about the area greatly, amazing person, someone I look up to. Frankly, if we had 100 Joes in this area, that neighborhood would be unbelievable. I agree with the attorney. I don't see a parking issue. I do think it increases the walkability, the desirability of the area. I do love New Brunswick. The zoning laws make it very difficult not to seek variances in this case. And I guess the last thing I would say is that I do fully support the project, and if you do happen to open up a convenience store, I ask that you would stock it with size 5 Huggies. Typically run low. That's all I have.
Thank you.
You're the first on the list.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting.
Madam Chair, if the board seeks to make a positive recommendation, it suggests the following conditions: compliance with terms of the DNR engineering report dated April 23rd, 2018, submission of all necessary easements and cross-access agreements for review and approval by the board attorney and the city engineer prior to the filing of same. Payment of all water and sewer connection fees pursuant to Title 1304 and 1308. Issuance of a road opening permit from the city engineer required. Compliance with terms of the Big Nell Consulting Group report dated April 18th, 2018. Planning review escrow funded for all anticipated post-approval reviews. Payment of any of the fees to the city of New Brunswick related to the development or use of the project. Payment of all outstanding taxes and water and sewer fees. All utilities on the site improvements maintained by the applicant for sole expense. All on-site utilities will be constructed underground or temporary purposes of the public right-of-way shall require city council approval. All construction staging shall be done on-site unless an encroachment allowing the same into the public right-of-way is approved by city council. The streets should be kept clean of sediment and debris. The applicant should cause streets to be cleaned and directly do so by the Director of Public Works. Tracking pads shall be installed at all construction exits. Replacement of damaged streets, curb, and sidewalks per the direction of the city engineer. That's it.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second it.
Charles McNair,
Yes.
Doug Sheehan,
Yes.
John Zimmerman,
Yes.
John Cox,
Yes.
Nancy Cole.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Other matters of interest to the public? Okay, seeing none, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Anybody ever?